I'm in the middle of dressing these boards, meaning that I'm going to plane all four edges. I'm going to use these in a project. The reason I'm doing that now is I want to lay out some joinery, and I want to make sure that all my surfaces are smooth. And especially when it comes time for assembly, I won't have to go back and do much sanding, if any at all, and these will be ready to go. But one thing I wanted to point out is that as you're planing, you need to be aware of grain direction. And what I mean by that is you think of petting a cat and you're rubbing the fur the wrong way. The same thing with grain direction on a piece of lumber. Now, some boards are easier to tell the grain direction than others, but generally speaking, you'll see a trend if you hold a board up. Like for this one, for example, I see this grain line coming up this way, which means my planing direction is going to be in that direction also. If I try to come the opposite direction, the blade's going to catch on the end grain and start to tear out chunks. And we want to avoid that, of course. Now, when I'm planing the edge, I'm looking at the grain on the face. Likewise, when I'm planing the face, I want to take a look at the edge here. Now, this is a pretty straight grain piece of wood, but I still see a tendency here for the grain to run up in this direction. So that's the direction I'm going to plane that way. So just a real quick tip before you grab the plane and start planing, you always want to pay attention to the grain direction. So you'll just grab your board, take note of the grain direction, and then you're going to orient that board in the vise. And here I'm just using my trusty Stanley number 4 plane. It's set for a very light pass. These have already been milled to rough size. All I'm doing now is removing the saw marks and any mill marks. Now I know it's hard to see, but I'm putting my fingers on the front to act as a fence on the side of that board, just to keep the plane in line with the board. So I'm just taking a couple light passes and almost down to a glass smooth surface. That's pretty good. Now, I want to do the opposite edge again. I want to look at the grain direction. Here it looks like my grain is running sort of uphill. This is a pretty great straight grain piece of wood, so I'm not too concerned about which direction we plane from, but we're going to go this way. You're looking for a full width shaving to know when you've got the surface smooth. Now onto the faces. Again, I'm going to look at the grain direction. Now, on this face, it doesn't look like I've got any particular grain direction, so I think we'll be okay no matter which way we go. So we're going to try it this way. You can actually hear the blade skipping across the saw marks from the mill. And that looks pretty smooth. Again, you're after these really thin shavings. I'm not trying to take much material off. All I'm doing is smoothing the surface. So I've got one face to go yet. And if I look again at my edge grain, it doesn't appear that it's going in any particular direction. It's pretty straight through here. So we'll just clamp it in the vise and take a few shavings off that face and be ready to go. One trick you can use if you're not sure if you're planing the whole surface or not is take a pencil and put some squiggle marks on the face, and when those are gone, you'll know that you've gotten down to a smooth surface. Just like that. So this piece is ready for layout work and cutting some joinery. So the question comes up, what happens if you plane in the wrong direction? You can see on here that I've marked the grain direction going this way, But I've got my board oriented in the vise in such a way that I'm going to plane it from the opposite direction. So if I try to do that, and if you listen carefully as the blade cuts across the surface, it's not very smooth, and I'm just getting these short little chunks. And if I feel the surface, it's going to be hard to see on camera, but if I feel the surface, it's pretty rough there, which means that it's actually tearing out the wood fibers because I'm going against the grain. So the remedy for that is, of course, just simply turn the piece around and take a few swipes in proper grain direction. And that makes a world of difference. So paying attention to the grain direction is a good idea to get the best surfaces for your layout and joinery work on your project.